Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Atomy Brainwaves, our podcast on education for educators. Brainwaves is produced by our wonderful team here at Atomy. What is Atomy? It's an online teaching and learning platform for secondary education. We provide engaging, curriculum-specific video and text lessons for over 190 subjects, as well as matching quizzes and exam practice that can be used for both learning and formative assessment. We also provide powerful analytics that can help teachers diagnose how their students are progressing and zero in on who might need a little bit of extra help. Our goal is to help make life easier for our teachers, give them more time to work on the most important things, and ultimately help to generate better outcomes. If you want to find out more about Atomy, head over to our main site at getatomy.com and feel free to try it out for free. Today, I was joined by Morrison McGill, the UK's most followed educator on social media and creator of the Teacher Toolkit. We discussed how overcoming adversity can shape the kind of teacher you become, how his social media presence developed from a Twitter account to a multi-format content platform, and the changing nature and importance of online educational resources. If this sounds like your kind of thing, make sure to subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you do your podcast listening, and make sure to leave us a quick 5-star review while you're at it. In the meantime, check out this episode, and I hope you enjoy it.
Are you going to teach us anything?
What, you want me to teach you something? You want to learn something? All right. You got it!
Hey everybody, welcome back to Atomy Brainwaves. I'm your host Simon, and I'm joined today by our very special guest, Morrison McGill, school teacher and leader across 3 decades, author with over 60,000 books sold worldwide, the UK's most followed educator on social media, and founder and curator of the hugely popular website, The Teacher Toolkit. Welcome, Ross.
Hi Simon, good morning everybody. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming on, joining us from London.
Yeah, I've been teaching and living in London for 29 years now, yeah.
Very, very nice. It's always enjoyable as a Dublin resident myself to get our time zones lined up. I think you were concerned before we started recording that I might be coming to you from the middle of the night in Sydney, but
yes.
Thankfully not the case. Lovely morning here in Dublin, sure it's the same in London. So, as we kind of heard a little bit in the intro there, you know, quite a lot of different facets to your journey in education. One we're kind of hopefully going to get a deep dive into is really the Teacher Toolkit and the sort of your presence online, and because obviously it's such a huge part of what you do and a hugely influential presence. But just to start, I was hoping you could give us a bit of a run through of your journey in education to date, you know, just from where you started back in your teaching days and how that has kind of led you to where you are now.
So my mother and father were Salvation Army officers working in the UK. Their work found myself move to 7 schools throughout my childhood, all state schools. I left where they were at the time, which is in Blackpool, northwest England, to go and train to be a teacher in the early 90s at Goldsmiths College in southeast London. And I've never left since. So obviously my 4-year degree in teaching was looking at my specialist subject, design and technology. But the placements gave people an opportunity to get really into the deep theory and practice of teaching and to actually make sure that you did want to be a teacher before you were released freely to the world. So it was 4 years, placements in independent state schools in London, and I actually went off to Nigeria first of all to work with the voluntary services. This is in 96, 97. And at the time, military coup, General Abacha, I was placed at Kano in North Nigeria. Really interesting. I was supposed to go for 2 years. I only lasted 3 months. I was, I guess, looking back, quite naive. This is before Facebook. When we were connected and we could contact family much more easily. This was 1 flight a week home type of stuff, and queuing for the phone box, and salary of £15 a month. So it was incredibly challenging, but still quite a fond time in my early days of the career. But I guess what it then led to was I returned to London and started supply teaching in a range of challenging schools across North and South London, and then eventually got myself into a job I know I don't want to go through all the specifics of my career, but essentially that's where I got fixed into a classroom, then middle leadership. About 3 years in, took on a brand new school, and one thing led to another into kind of school leadership in large secondary schools, so generally 1,500, 2,000 pupil population, 250 staff, to a point where I became a deputy head teacher in my last school in Westminster. And where the blogging happened was, I mean, I've always been a blogger. I've got blogs going back 20 years, when you had the ADSL connection and the page took a minute to change on your screen. So you had to make sure you clicked the right thing, because it had to be worth your time waiting at your desk. So I was always curious about the technology, and I always used to enjoy my computer days back at school. But I started blogging from a dark place, actually. I lost my job. I took voluntary redundancy in about 2010. My boy was born premature. I didn't know that at the time, but I was taking voluntary redundancy on the basis that after 17 years of teaching, I wanted to step out and think about things differently. And then my boy was born premature, so I found myself without any work for 6 months. So I started blogging to communicate with family, and I'd come, sitting 12 hours a day at his incubator for 80 days, life and death scenario. But I knew the blog was public. I guess that was a accidental decision. So the blog went viral, but essentially it was to communicate with family. And then I'd post a link on my Facebook wall. So when my son came home on oxygen, and after many operations and things like that, I had 2 or 3 months at home, not teaching for the first time ever in my life. So through school right into teaching. So only now, although I'm working within education, I'm not physically attached to a school. So it's interesting now working as a business mindset. But I found myself at home, not writing or not teaching, but having a blog that in the premature world go viral. And I had an old blog called Teacher Toolkit. Very different to what it looks like now. I've got some screenshots somewhere I could share with you. It was on blogger.com. It had about 30,000 views at the time. I'd only written about 20 articles on it, but it was pretty much a place to just reflect about teaching. And I only wrote once every 6 weeks. And this was in the very early days of bloggers, or teacher bloggers. There was lots of blogs around at that time, but teaching blogs, very, very rare. So I essentially regurgitated it, imported it into WordPress.com at the time, and started writing for The Guardian and my blog. And about 6 weeks I got really bored, and I thought, right, I need to get back into schools. So essentially when I did, it was my intention that having gone through this blog journey through a difficult period made me think, right, I want to keep up with the writing and talk about what I was doing as a teacher while I was working. So where my website is today is 9 years on from that moment. And if I said I didn't tinker with the website every day, I'd be lying. Obviously, I take a day off at Christmas and I have a couple of weeks summer holiday and those types of things. But pretty much it's a tweak there, a blog there, change the graphic. It's like people understand coding and HTML language. It's constantly doing that. I have a few more people to help me now. But pretty much the kind of structure or the bones of the website was all my tinkering behind the scenes, as well as being a full-time teacher. So we can talk about that and how I manage all that as we go through the podcast. But that today, 500,000 readers a month. It's a full-time job in its own right. I could easily have 15, 20 people around me and everyone would be busy. For me, the struggle now as an entrepreneur is trying to get that capacity, that income to have that team. And plus me to let go a little bit and let other people take over. But I'm on the cusp of that stage, I suppose.
Yeah, well, it's a really inspiring story in many ways, and a really fascinating one with regards to all of the various twists and turns along the way. And I guess one thing, just before we kind of go further into the blog, one thing that's kind of becoming clear to me from what you're saying there is the extent to which these things have come out of adversity, I guess. Would it be fair to say? I mean, going all the way back to what you talked about with your experience in Nigeria, and obviously that being something you learned a huge amount from, but obviously it was difficult. And then what you're talking about with your son, which obviously sounds like such a huge.
I mean, we all face challenges in life. We all, we talk, time of Black Lives Matters, and we're talking about privilege and me being a white man and all those types of things. I get all that, but I think it's important to consider, everyone's got dealt with a different set of cards. We all have different capacities in terms of how we respond to things. I think of my own mother and father, where my first 20 years of my life was in a homeless environment. So I wasn't homeless, but my mother and father were in charge of homeless hostels. So my childhood experiences was in that environment. So I was always around incredibly disadvantaged people, complex mental health, and this is back in the 70s and 80s when we didn't talk about any of this. And I think back to some of the things I may have done at the time just for no fault of my own, when you'd hang around with a schizophrenic or an alcoholic or see a dead body, and sometimes it would be horrific, other times you'd laugh it off through kind of sheer shock or not knowing how to respond. So I guess all those interesting stories I've soaked it up, I suppose. It's become part of my DNA, which is why I've probably given 30 years of my life to working with disadvantaged kids, I'm not specifically disadvantaged, but children and students, and getting the best opportunities to help society. Just so happens that I've ended up working in really, really tough schools, rather than opting for a different teaching approach. And it's interesting, last 3 years I've worked in all types of schools, so my views on teaching has significantly evolved. But I think, going back to your question on diversity, I've got to the place where I think how you respond to adversity often is a result of experiencing it. Now the challenge is what cultural capital or knowledge you have prior to those experiences, and the resources you have around you enable you to respond. So when I lost my job, thankfully I had my own kind of 2-bed flat in London at the time, which 15 years ago, people listening in London will know that when properties were given away, it was 120% mortgage offers and all sorts of things. So I had no savings, and I'm sure you'll know, listeners, that teachers aren't paid a very good salary. So it was a real struggle just to get on the property ladder. But I lost my house as a result of being made redundant, and it was a choice I made to sell it to clear my debts. And at the same time, the blog started. And I guess looking back, that was me responding to that situation at the time. And I guess now having my own blog, my own business, and having the choice now to work within the state sector for the government as a civil servant, or working freely online, creating income, I guess allows me to survive outside of the state. So it's really interesting, because my doctoral research at Cambridge, part of it's looking at neoliberalism and populism and the free market. So I guess I am profiting from free market, even though I've spent my entire life working within the state. So I find that very interesting dichotomy that I'm currently in. But yeah, that's a good question. Adversity, yeah, much of it has responded to adversity, but sadly not everyone has those skills, or even has the same experiences or worse than I. Whether they have the resources around them to respond is key. So, I might have lost my house, but I had an internet connection to be able to write a blog. Some people might not even have that. So context is key with everything.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's such a huge factor in anyone's journey, the extent to which their experiences and the things they overcome influence how they handle adversity and difficulty as it arises down the line, even in situations that are completely removed in one sense from anything they've experienced before. But if they've had to overcome really difficult, challenging things in the past, even in a different context or scenario, it sounds to me, everything what you're saying rings true for me, in the sense that lessons learned from those experiences can make dealing with a new challenge, a new difficulty,
I mean,
not easier, but you're more well equipped.
Yeah, but I think of my childhood, my mother and father were Salvation Army officers, so that Christian attitude to life, the reflection, the willing to be open, I think that's very much part of my DNA. yeah, I am a stubborn so-and-so, but part of my professional dialogue is to be open and reflective to develop. And we all read self-help, self-development books at some point in our lives, and we all want to learn and be better or be the best at our careers. And I think that's regardless of what you do with your life. Generally, human default is to improve, to develop. But particularly in teaching, because it's such a complex business that there's no one solution, which makes teaching quite a fascinating and also challenging profession in which to work. The challenge is, if whatever school you choose to work in, it's how the teachers are nurtured, measured, judged, what have you, that makes it also a frustrating place in which to work. I mean, no one's judging you for your podcast today, I guess, Simon.
Not today. We'll wait until it's released.
Yeah. So the listeners may, and obviously we want people to listen, but it's no one's going to give you an outstanding or special measures grade. I know we all work in a digital era where you're getting 3 or 5 stars. Please press 5 stars, everyone. But
thank you very much. You beat me to the punch.
But you get all that kind of stuff, part of my social media research is also, it's really interesting how the world's evolving, that originally I could go to a restaurant and review the steak and give the restaurant 4 or 5 stars, but now the restaurant can give me as a customer a rate. You look at it on Uber, I can hire an Uber taxi, I can rate the driver, but they can rate me as a passenger. And if I now... There's 2 issues here. If I now review the cab driver and lie, or they lie, it's either in my interest to be honest or to pretend that it was a great journey, but that benefits no one. So it's really interesting how that era of social media in terms of reviews is going to evolve across all sectors of society, not just by judging teachers.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and it speaks to kind of what I wanted to sort of get into with you next, the changing nature of formats and how these things develop, because, with regards to the teacher toolkit as, I guess, a label, I must confess, I actually, in researching this, I had, I think, been under the misconception that Teacher Toolkit began as the book, because I know obviously that's the name of one of the books you've released and then became the blog. Yeah. I didn't realize that in fact it was originally the blog and sort of the other way around.
It started on Twitter. I started on at Ross McGill, which was a personal profile place, because I was curious, what is this? Why are Demi Moore and is it Ashton Cook? They were doing it back in 2006. So
Trailblazers.
So I sat in it for a couple of years, and then I logged in on 2008. And then in the clash, I thought, this is interesting. I'm a school leader, safeguarding kids, personal pictures, things like that. So I'll create a teaching account. So actually, I was lucky enough to be on a holiday in Vietnam. I've only been there once, but probably the most famous. My most favourite place in terms of destinations. And I remember sitting on the beach, and I created another Twitter account, and I tweeted from my kind of beach lilo. It'd be interesting to go back to that very first tweet. But I remember creating an account, and it was specifically to just talk about teaching, nothing else. That's the challenge for me today with my audience, is to just keep it on teaching and try and avoid. Twitter will be aware as a very political platform. But I try and keep it teaching, so that Ross McGill is my personal. But obviously, that was a teacher channel. Today, it's pretty much the kind of arm of the blog or the business. So it's interesting that it's now part of my identity, but a business in its own right. So maybe my own Ross McGill ID is more pertinent today. Anyway, so it started as a Twitter account, then it evolved back into the blog, even though the blog started in 2007. So the blog did start first, and the name Teacher, for obvious reasons, Toolkit, because I'm a design and technology teacher, and equipping teachers with the tools. There's lots of tools out there. I would like to hope that my tools help people transform the theory into practice. So I'm very much a practical-based kind of thinker. My templates such as the 5-minute lesson plan and what have you, just allow teachers who have a very busy and complex life to support their thinking, not reduce their thinking, to support it, and to help them produce the product or the outcome much quicker and get rid of lots of the silly stuff. So the Twitter, the blog emerged. So my first book was 100 Ideas, which was a response to Bloomsbury reading my blog and being very popular and being also one of the fewer bloggers at the time. But I wrote it in 3 months because it was a privilege to be asked, but two, having lost my house and debts, not knowing what it could achieve, looking back now, it paid off a credit card. So it got me into the writing bug that I could earn an income to support my teacher salary, and my wife and I lost our salaries, and my son was ill for a good 5 years, so we didn't go abroad or anything. So any kind of online pocket money was really good to pay the kind of monthly petrol fuel fees. So that was a real lovely thing. And then it led to the second book, which was Teacher Toolkit, which was my book, not part of a series. And it was bringing everything together, not regurgitating stuff I'd already put on my blog, but just bringing together all my own thinking. But the book, Teacher Toolkit, was specifically to help new teachers. And it's there's an interesting book story I can go through in terms of the highs and lows of writing books and the lessons learnt from writing different books and contracts. But the book was specifically for NQTs, new qualified teachers, and to help them through those kind of first 3, 4, 5 years where research time and time again, particularly in OECD countries, supports that teachers just leave the profession very much in their early years because of workload. It's not what they expected, they lack the support, it's not for them. So I do think, how did I survive 27 years, 25 years in the classroom? It's interesting. That's something I'm still trying to fathom out today. Why did I stay 25 years? Because I had loads of issues in teaching, loads of highs and lows. And my father passed away in 2004. I nearly left. I've had loads of highs and lows. Ofsted inspections, obviously the lows. I nearly left. Redundancy. I stepped out for a couple of months, got back in. Interesting. Life gets in the way for all of us, and life affects whatever profession we choose. But for obvious reasons, my fascinations with how it influences teachers.
Hey folks, hope you're enjoying the episode so far, and we've got plenty more to come after this quick break. Here at Atomy Brainwaves, we're all about education, and not just for students, for ourselves too. We would love to hear from you, whether that's feedback on one of our episodes or a question you'd like to see answered by one of our guests or by Sue. So, if you've got a comment or a question, don't hesitate to email us at brainwaves@getatomy.com. Looking forward to hearing from you. In the meantime, let's get back to it. Yeah, and let me say, I'm sure there are plenty of teachers who are very grateful that you did, stay the course and learn the lessons that you did, and in order to impart them via your platform. But I think, one thing that's quite interesting to me is that as there's kind of two sides of this, where on the one hand you have everything you've described there in terms of, I guess, your mission or your goal, for want of a better word, of providing this toolkit to teachers, helping them stay the course, learning from the lessons that you picked up and providing that advice. And that's sort of the common thread all the way through from the early days to where you are now. But the other side of it is how much the platform has changed as you've gone along. You talked about how it just started out as sending a tweet out while you were sitting on a beach on your holidays, to a point now where it's this multi-content platform. So I just wondered if you could talk us a little bit through that process. Obviously a huge instigator of change is the more success, the more people who are reading your articles and listening. But so today, what other factors influenced that sort of thing?
Well, it started off as a blog, as a diary, which anyone can do. It's a bit of investment of your own time, and what I loved about it was one person in Australia read it and left a comment, and I got some feedback. And in my own schools, sometimes you wouldn't hear from the teacher next door to you because we were both busy and we worked with each other every day. So I loved that nature of connecting with people online. and getting feedback for stuff. And then one reader became 100, and then 1,000, and then what have you. And then it got to a place where I thought, oh, this is interesting, it's exciting. And then it eventually led to the book. And then I started to think about having so moving from Blogger to WordPress, which gave me a bit more functionality. And then I wanted to get Teacher Toolkit as a domain name. So it started off as teachertoolkit.me, so that was £100. And then what was interesting is, as I started to write more and the blogs became more popular for teachers, a lot of companies came to me to say, look, we like what you do, we want you to give you our product, could you write about it? So I'd get loads of freebies personally, but also then I'd start to push it a little and get... so I've got a little visualize, little cameras you put kids' work underneath, so you can draw on the table. So I got to a place where I was saying, look, can I have 100 of them, and then I'll do it. And so then I gave all my teachers these devices, so the whole school was benefiting. But the downside was I had the extra workload, so then I had to actually report back and ask Simon, can you give me some pictures, some videos? I've got to report back. So then the interesting dichotomy was that it started to blur the lines between my work and my personal.
Yeah.
So I was bringing in lots of devices personally, profiting from them, the school was, and then around the table at governors were wanting more of the same. And I was saying, well, it's my personal platform, and what can I say, what can I not say? When am I going to do it, in school or at home? So all those things started to happen, and I started to pay, I think it was about £100 a month or something, for a web license, a server. Because as the more people read and clicked things, my website would crash. And if you were then going to start to take on some work which is paid for, you didn't want the website to collapse. So I'm now in a place where I'm reading 20-page contracts, non-disclosure agreements, sums of money, anything between 100, in the early days, 50 or £100 for kind of silly little tweets, which is still nothing to be kind of surprised at. A lot of people might have found that surprising, but for me now that's kind of evolved into 5 figures, which is nuts. But that's I've tweeted every day, I've written a blog every day, pretty much website tinkering for 12 years. So this is now the place that I'm at, but I'm very much still a one-man band. I'd like to think that I compete with all the kind of larger organisations out there who are paid huge sums of money and turn over much more content to a place where they can drive those prices. But the kind of the long story short is I've paid all this out of my own pocket to keep the website free, available to read and to download all these tools rather than charge people. However, today, so apart from 10 years of people downloading things just through a hyperlink, I had no data in terms of what people were doing, even though I knew my blog was popular through general statistics. So about 18 months ago, I created this resources platform with a shopping basket where you could download a resource for free or paid for. And people in the UK will know that we've just gone through GDPR about 18 months ago. So I had to spend a lot of money on privacy policy, legal fees, data protection, if I was going to collect your email address. But today I now have 33,000 email addresses. Before GDPR I had 10,000, but I got rid of those and started again. So it's people that generally want to sign up. So essentially, got a lot of data to manage, a lot of privacy to consider. But at least if you're downloading a resource for free or for 50p, I can email you if you want me to. So people opt in. So 33,000 people have opted in. So I know there's the demand. So I guess by people opting in, I can talk to them privately rather than publicly on my website or Twitter, which is nice, a bit like a little fan club. And for the last 18 months, it's probably brought in enough money for me to pay for the website itself. So I'm now at this place after 12 years where the website income pays for the website costs itself. And that's great considering I've spent years, anything between £100 a month to maybe £1,500 a month, keeping the website alive. And last month I launched a subscription service. And again, it was just to give me a bit more capacity. So for the last 3 years, I've been travelling to visit and work in schools across the world. So the challenge for me is as I get a train or a plane somewhere, I can't be at the computer. And then I'm doing it on the train or the plane, trying to keep up with that demand, make things work. as well as going to schools and helping that need. So the challenge was I was getting even more thinly spread. So the subscription stuff I've been trying to do for 3 years, but lockdown has given me that time to do it. And so I now email teachers 3 times a week, and the subscription's new. And I've got about 500 people signed up, paying £1 a month. And what's great about that is, in my opinion, I give them so much quality material that it's very hard to argue with £1. The challenge for me also is schools should be paying for that, not the individual. But again, we all choose what we want to do with our lives to make our lives better or our jobs better. So there's that. But if I then get to a certain level where the subscription pays for my salary, I have less pressure to chase schools. I can then work with schools who can't afford my services and reach more disadvantaged areas of the UK and abroad. And again, the challenge is there's only one of me, so that's the next problem I have. So I've looked at training other teachers to be part of my ethos and mission and things like that, but I'll get there eventually. But there's the constant pull and push between decisions and website pressure. If you've got 500,000 people reading your site every week, and you've got 33,000 people clicking and saying, oh, that doesn't work, I can't download that. I mean, I look at my inbox this morning, it's quite low really, but I've got 70 emails waiting, and they're all they're all technical. I can't download this, so I have to take on freelancers to help with podcasts, to set passwords, to upload resources, code, all sorts of things, or I'm doing it myself. So I'm not profiting from all this income. It's to keep the website running and to give me a bit of a salary, so to speak. My main income comes from working with schools, but that's all disappeared the last 115 days in lockdown. But the website has seen obviously a natural shift to online stuff because everyone's at home. So my plan for once we get back to some form of normality is to try and be a bit more ruthless with my time and do a kind of 50-50 split rather than before it was pretty much 78% of the time in schools, the rest remotely. And obviously education's seasonal in different parts of the academic year. So now it would be very, very quiet. So pretty much now till the middle of August before results days is when I get a lot of downtime to read or to totally log off or to research and do some stuff behind the scenes on the website. And then September it goes crazy again. So with all those issues and decisions comes a huge workload. But yeah, I'm really pleased with what I've achieved. It's a constant balance. It's a constant hard line between, free, paid, advertising, authentic content. That's where I'm at today.
Yeah, and it's it definitely rings true, all of the just how many variables they are with regards to an online business and curating online content and so many variables at play there which are pushing and pulling you in different directions. But it's it's great to hear the depth of thought you've put into the approach and the process and maintaining what you're centrally trying to achieve and making sure that everything operates around that rather than the other way around.
Well, I'll give you one more interesting story. About 2 years ago, I had 75 teachers writing inside the site. I got to a place where I had an editor, I had a sub-editor, I had a coder, and I had voluntary teachers wanting to write on the platform. Some were getting paid, some were just voluntary, and I guess they were benefiting from writing inside an established website that had a great profile, and it allowed them to get a voice. So I've got 3 of those bloggers now with book contracts and a 4th in the pipeline. But the challenge was, as I increased that capacity, I often found that I was physically on the road working on the website till midnight and not benefiting from it in terms of my own mental health and well-being and also financially. So that was a real tough one without having sufficient income. The life of an entrepreneur is always taking risks and not necessarily having £500,000 stored behind you to grow a business. But so the challenge for me is a lot of people originally wanted to follow the blog because it was me, rather than suddenly finding Simon's blog on there and who's this chap and I like that idea. So one, it gave me a wide voice, a range of topics, which was good for teachers. And the website grew, but actually since I've reshaped it back to being me, and I've really stripped back the time, the website's got more popular. So What I'm trying to analyze, is it because people want me, or is it because websites and my coding and analytics are sharper and better, or is it because people actually want to just read me, not Simon's blog? So it's really, really constantly a learning curve, and I think of all the blogging stuff that I've learned or self-taught, it's really important that you're clear about what you're sharing, you're coherent, you're consistent, and that you're niche. And I cover a wide range of topics, but I think I'd be well known for practical ideas for teachers, workload well-being, and just general really good ideas, rather than lots of other topics in education. And I think that brings my tribe together, and I help those and people that want that will come. They'll come. So that's what I try to remind myself of. It's just the constant learning curve. I'm sure in 5 years the blog will be different again, and I'll have done a few other decisions, some that will work really well, some that will have been a car crash. But that's just the nature of writing, blogging, creating stuff online, etc.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're absolutely right, and this degree to which things change is just so responsive to external factors. But I suppose the more experience you have with that, the more up to date you are with these trends, and learning from the changes you make and identifying what's working and what's not makes it presumably gets easier and gets more straightforward as you go along. But it ties a little bit into what I wanted to ask you next, because I wanted to, I guess, broaden it out a little bit and talk about online resources generally. And I guess this one is a little bit of a two-parter, because first of all in terms of the present, second of all in terms of the future, because obviously we're at a point, as we can tell, just we've explored it through the lens of your journey, but in a broader conversation, the extent to which online resources have become a part of the education world, where they were 10 years ago, for instance, versus where they are now is such a huge change. And that's online resources in various different formats, something like, your blog and your social media platform, the way that operates, versus something like what we do here at Atomy, which is maybe more like specific curriculum based kind of teaching assistance sort of go. But I just wanted to see, I guess, first of all, how important do you think these online resources are to the education world now? What's their place within it? How useful they are, how relevant they are. And then second of all, and I know this is kind of a bit speculative, but what does the future look like with regards to these things, with regards to online resources? Obviously so much has changed in the just immediate past with the lockdown and all of the challenges that has thrown up. So yeah, I guess, where do you think we are now with regards to online education resources, and where do you think we'll be going into the future?
Well, I think the first thing is that schools need to provide their teachers with high quality resources, whether it's self-generated or it's bought in, and that comes from local authorities, the government, and obviously external companies provide a service or a particular need. You might plug into a company that does well-being resources because the government or the local authority don't necessarily have them or specialise in them. So you're always going to find experts in certain areas that you can buy into. My first and foremost view is that schools should provide those resources for teachers. So if I think of the time when I qualified, or whoever's listening in whatever career, your organisation provides you with the kind of basic tools. But as we develop with experience, you suddenly realise that you want particular niche resources. So you'll go down the high street long before the website, and I'd pop into WH Smith. There's a plug for WH Smith. And I'd buy a book on the shelf, and it was written by Simon, and it was about X, and I went away and read it and actually improved my teaching. And then I might share that in a session and what have you. So now today we can download audible books, podcasts, and resources. And as ever with all products, you get some that are incredible, some that are a total waste of time and money. So the challenge for us all is that, particularly with teaching resources, there's so many places. There's also going to be so many places that are amazing and also not so amazing. And some of it will be for free, and some of it will be paid for, and some of it will be overpriced, some of it will be a total great value, and some of it will be a total rip-off. And I think the challenge for us all is, whatever we're choosing to do, is working out what's best value. And it's all right to have the tools, but does it lead to actual change? And that's what I try to focus on more is, here's a template, but let me show you how to use it to help improve your life in teaching. And that's what I've always focused on. My own story resources came from just sharing stuff on my blog for years, getting loads of clicks, and then I used platforms such as the TES to share my ideas. And then to see, the 5-minute lesson plan, I think last time I checked, was about 1.2 million downloads. So the test got, crudely speaking and thinking analytically as a blogger, they got all the benefits and clicks from that. And by sharing my resource with their site, I lost the terms and conditions for my own resource. So that was then pushed to Test India, Test Australia. And then this was also at the time when I published my first book, 100 Ideas. And this is in 2012 or 13. And at the time, terms and conditions was that an individual teacher stroke blogger couldn't profit from resources. And what that meant was I had my resource on their site, and if you clicked on my profile, it took you to my website where you could see I had a picture of my book, which when you clicked that, took you to Amazon where you could buy my book. Apparently that breached their terms and conditions at the time, so they started to download my resources and take them off. So I blogged about that and was frustrated that a teacher wanting to share their ideas freely lost their terms and conditions or their copyright permissions for the resources. And then, again, my story, losing my job and trying to make a 50 pence here or there to pay the petrol, I was being penalised for it. Meanwhile, while the site still hosted paid-for resources by large organisations. So I started to do a bit of a campaign. Long story short was I influenced the test terms and conditions globally, that teachers could then have their own profile with their own social media links, and I guess I was the catalyst for tests starting to use paid for teachers, the paid for service, which is, you can see teachers pay teachers in America. It's been around for a long time. A lot of teachers making a living online. But I 7 or 8 years later, I see a lot of teachers through lots of forums creating lots of resources and making their salary just from working at their desk at home. The challenge is that if I can do that, then I don't need to work in schools for 50, 60 hours a week. I'll make a living online, and that stops us recruiting more teachers. The danger is, or as ever, is if I'm doing that instead and I've only taught for 2 years, can I generally contribute good quality resources to the teaching profession if I don't have that experience? So that question you'll get forever, I think, full stop. In terms of the, going back to the crux of it, I think it's important that teachers do share resources free. However, if I'm doing it I think there's another issue with copyright. Teachers creating resources in school, in a school kind of mindset that your school company organisation owns that resource. But if I'm at home, 8 o'clock at night on my desk creating a resource and I put it on my blog, I very much own that product. And it's really important to differentiate. But if you're going to share your resource elsewhere, you are losing your copyright and giving it over. The other question is, should it be free or should it be paid? I think that's a question forever. I think the bottom line is we all need to feed our families. For 25 years, I got a monthly salary as a teacher. Creating resources online allowed me to have an extra bit of capacity. Sometimes I could give things away for free. Sometimes I couldn't. Today, every pound matters for me. I think I'm working just as hard as I always have. But when I create a resource, it needs to lead to good referrals, clicks, downloads, and I need people, whether it's a free or paid for resource, to come back. Because that's where I am today, and as a business, I suppose I have to think, how can I transform a teacher's life, make life better? Can the school ideally pay for it, or does a teacher want to go out of their own way and part with their own cash, and is it going to be worth it? So it's a constant reflection on my part about trying to get a good balance without ripping people off. And I think for 50p or a quid, I think it's, you think of a lot of stuff out there, whether it's just an app you download on iTunes or a book that can cost £10 or £15. It's a constant thinking curve for me.
shifting plates constantly with regards.
Yes.
Yeah. But hey, look, it's I can't argue with that logic. First of all, and second of all, it's some really sound insights with regards to the process, and hopefully something that teachers out there who make avail of resources themselves, or who are even perhaps considering entering that world themselves, think that they have something that they can offer and that can help teachers, other teachers around the world. Hopefully it's something they can definitely take and make valuable use
I think,
of.
Everyone's got something to contribute, but I think if you're going out there straight away to make a buck, people will sniff you out very quickly. And I'd like to think that 12 years my audience is growing for very good reasons rather than for profitable reasons, and I guess the nice thing is it's paying my salary now. But that was never my starting point or my intention. It just seems to be where it is now as a result of forces.
Yeah. Well, I guess, the moral of the story is if you do want to get started, you should start tweeting on a beach in Vietnam. That's the sound. No, but jokes aside, it is really sound advice, and something I think will provide a lot of value to teachers. Very quickly before we go, I know you're under time pressure, but we always like to finish out by asking our guests for just a quick, fun piece of advice, or maybe it's a fun anecdote from your teaching days. Doesn't have to be all that serious, just a quick little thing. So if anything springs to mind for you to share with us.
The only thing I can really remember, there's lots of things from very violent and horrific events, from stabbings and what have you, to the kind of humorous things about how you respond to situations. I remember setting up a soldering iron demonstration as a newly qualified teacher. It's funny how these things imprint on your memory. And I was being observed by the tutor as well as my teacher, and I think the oxide emissions from the solder had made a student who was probably already feeling quite sick more so, and they vomited all over my display. And it's really interesting how myself and the tutor, obviously through panic in her eyes, I saw how we slowly shifted the resource in the demonstration to another part of the classroom. But I was fighting the inevitable, because you know what kids are like. If even some of our adults today, if you smell vomit, it makes you vomit. So I had a numerous episodes of vomiting in this lesson observation, and it's pretty much a lesson destined to be a car crash. But looking back, it was a laughable thing. But I think it sums up what I've learned about teaching. Teaching is so unpredictable that you need to, throughout your career, learn to respond as ever, just like we all do in extreme situations or natural, is making calculated and calm decisions, responding through wise decisions that adapt to the context in which you work, the classroom, the kids, your environment in terms of the size, the classroom, etc., etc. But life gets in the way, is my saying. So whether it's a vomit or a fight or a bumblebee that comes through the window and all the kids scream, I think what we need to do as teachers, although you get the resources that help you transform and make your life easier, you equally need to learn and build physical responses. So I'm a big fan of non-verbal signals. I could do like this, tapping my watch and give the non-verbal that we're running out of time, or go and look at over there, or chewing gum out. All those kind of non-verbal cues. Teaching's about learning those bits of non-verbal data to respond to in-class situations that I don't think any book can give you. And it comes through that practical experience and having a really good coach alongside you to help see and provoke your own reflection. And I guess in summary, my blog is pretty much my life online as a teacher for the last 12 years, and how it's emerged through self-reflection. And going back to that point I made earlier, that the teachers that are the most reflective, personally, I think are better teachers. And if there's a piece of research I blogged about the other day on metacognition, that we're in a time where we have to help kids learn more about metacognitive strategies, how to learn, what do I know, what do I not know. But this research recommended that although we do that as teachers, what did you learn today, what did you learn yesterday, we should also ask the pupils, hey, how did I teach? Should I go faster, slower? Do I need to reteach that? And if I think of my own experience, my own classrooms, or the teachers I've observed in my career, where those things have happened, they're generally happier, higher performing classrooms.
There you go. Plenty of lessons to be learned from all sorts of classrooms, even ones full of vomiting students and teachers. Ross, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your wisdom. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks, everybody, for listening right to the end.
Yes, thank you very much, everybody. You can check us out on our main site at getatomy.com. Check out Ross's site and resource, a teacher toolkit. And you can listen to more episodes of this on whatever platform you're listening to this episode on. For the time being, it is goodbye from Ross.
See you, everyone. Thank you.
And goodbye from me. Take care.